Welcome to Spooky Halls. On tonight's episode, The Protector by Doom Dragon 682.
I like kids. They're so innocent and full of life, and I hate to see them unhappy. When I was younger, my family lived in a small town in Ireland. I would babysit for our neighbors whenever they wanted to go out for an event or just a night out. I continued to babysit after we moved to America for my mother's job. I liked America. It was so much different from my home. My father didn't like it, but eventually adjusted to life here and even found a way to continue his work. I've always looked up to my father. He was my hero growing up, and I still looked up to him even as an adult. When I first mentioned that I wanted to get a job in Child Protective Services, he was opposed. I suppose he always wanted me to continue the family business, but I insisted that this was the path I chose. Eventually, he gave in and supported me. I was his only daughter, after all, and I was family. Most of the time, I was sent to homes on calls from schools or neighbors, the former because of behavioral issues or bruises, and the latter because of shouting or the sound of fights. Some of the calls were misunderstandings, usually because the kid fell while playing or the parents were actually yelling at a sports game. I even once got a call because a concerned neighbor heard a man yell, "I'll kill you!" along with the sounds of crashing and yelling. It turned out to be a father trying to kill a rat that was scampering around his daughter's bedroom. Those are the calls I always wished I was getting, but it was the serious ones that always made my stomach turn. As I pulled up to the small house in the country with an unkept lawn and dirty windows, I assumed this was one of the more serious calls. We had received a call from the local school informing us about a little boy had been turning up to school lately looking dirty and with bruises on his body. When the child was asked where he got them, he'd simply tell them, "I fell." I checked the information we had on the child's family. He lived with his mother, a Miss Jacobson, who didn't work. Instead, she survived off unemployment checks and child support from the boy's father. I sighed. I already knew this was going to be a frustrating visit. As I stepped out of my car, my stomach growled at me, giving me an uncomfortable reminder that I had skipped breakfast. Maybe I'd get a bite to eat soon. I made my way up to the door, careful to avoid overgrown patches of grass growing from cracks in the cement walkway, and I rang the bell and waited. I didn't get a response, so I rang again, and then a third time, and on the fourth I finally got the response of, "I hear you! I hear you! Damn it! Give me a minute!" The voice sounded raspy and tired, like the owner probably went through a pack of cigarettes a day and just woke up. I sighed and placed a hand on the pendant dangling from my neck. It was my father's, a symbol from our hometown that symbolized protection and guardianship. It felt appropriate on with this kind of job. After several moments of waiting, a woman with frazzled red hair answered the door. She was wearing a bathrobe and slippers and had an unpleasant odor of cigarettes and booze. She had a look of annoyance on her face, and I plastered a fake smile on my face. "Good evening, Miss Jacobson. I'm with Child Protective Services. We received a call informing us that your child might be experiencing some issues, and I've been sent to take a look around and speak with you. May I come in?" She scrawled at me for a moment, and I thought she'd tell me to go away, though I was sure she wouldn't use such a polite phrasing. After a moment she spoke. "I didn't get a call saying you'd be coming." "Well, ma'am, given the severity of the claims that we've received, we figured it'd be best to make this a surprise visit." After a moment she gave me an annoyed sigh. "Fine, whatever. Come in." She walked away from the door, and I stepped in. and as soon as I got a look inside, I considered just turning around and leaving. The place was filthy. The door led to a living room with the couch and the TV sitting perpendicular to the door. Past that was a dining room. On the right was a hallway that I can only assume led to the bedrooms. On the left was a kitchen with marble countertops. She walked to the table and I followed, taking notice of a stained couch in the living room and an overflowing ashtray on the coffee table. She took a seat at the table and I sat across from her. She looked bored and annoyed. I opened my folder and grabbed my pen. I began asking her all the basic questions. How she treated the child and what she did in her personal life. She gave me vague answers, saying her son was well taken care of. Eventually I sighed and put down my pen. "Miss Jacobson, do you mind if I take a look around the house?" "Why the hell do you need to do that?" she replied while lighting another cigarette. I repressed a scrawl. I hated the smell of those things. I composed myself before I spoke. "Well, I'd like to get an idea of the environment you and your son are living in. That way I can give a proper report." She rolled her eyes in annoyance and stood. "Fine. Have a look around." I started in the kitchen. The sink was full of dirty dishes. The pantry mostly had canned goods and boxed macaroni and ramen noodles. The fridge wasn't much better. There was a half-empty jug of milk that was close to expiration date, a few eggs and condiments, and beer. Lots of beer. I closed the fridge and wrote in my notepad, then made my way to the kitchen. Miss Jacobson followed behind me. The bathroom had a pile of dirty clothes next to the bathtub, which I could have sworn had mold growing around the edges. I made more notes and moved to the child's room. Dirty clothes and broken toys littered the floor. There was a bed that was much too small for something her son's age with a single thin pillow and blanket. Not even a sheet. I made an angry note and left the room. Next was the mother's room. Like her son's, clothes littered the floor around a large bed with a nightstand on each side. A lamp and an ashtray rested on one, and an empty box of condoms and pill bottle that rested on the other. I scribbled a note and whipped to face Miss Jacobson in the corner. She still wore the same bored look on her face, and I hate to say it, but my anger got the best of me. "Miss Jacobson, this is unacceptable. These living conditions are deplorable for anyone to be living in, especially a child." I stormed past her, ready to continue letting her know what I thought of this place, when suddenly she struck me across the back of my head with a baseball bat I hadn't noticed was laying in the corner. My body crumbled to the ground like a sack of rocks, and I felt my limbs go numb. She let out a breath and dropped the bat. As she did, I heard the sound of the front door open and small footsteps. Her son had just gotten home. I heard her hiss under her breath. "Shit!" She quickly made her way out of the room. After a moment, I heard her yelling at him about being late or something. I stood and touched the back of my head. Most of my skull had been caved in, but the bone was already shifting back into place. I was really angry now, and stepped into the closet. Once there, I began stripping off my shirt and skirt. I didn't want to get blood on them, as it was hard to get out. Next, I took off my shoes and placed them into the corner. I heard Miss Jacobson yell at her son to go to the store and get her some stuff. After that was the sound of footsteps heading back to the room. I grinned when I heard her gasp as she entered. She was silent for a moment. I could picture her rubbing her face in confusion. I imagined that after a moment her eyes rested on the bloody handprint on the closet door. Her footsteps slowly approached, and I grinned wider. My teeth had already lengthened to the fangs, and I felt my mouth changing shape to fit them. When she threw open the door, my hand lunged out and grabbed her by the throat. Thick black fur sprouted all over my arms, and my nails lengthened to claws. Her eyes widened in utter terror, and she struggled to breathe. My stomach growled, and I opened my jaws wide. Guess I was right about getting a bite to eat. After I was done, I went to the bathroom and cleaned up. Then I went back to the room and got dressed. I went back to my car afterwards and called the police. I informed them that I was investigating Miss Jacobson. under the suspicion of child abuse, which wasn't a lie, and when I arrived there, wasn't an answer at the door, so I took a look inside out of concern and found Miss Jacobson's mangled corpse. When her son returned home, he was told that there was an accident, and he'd go live with his father. There was a look of relief in his eyes. There was a small investigation into her death, and I was almost worried it'd be traced to me. But luckily, it turns out that the boyfriend, a meth addict with a pet Rottweiler, had been heard the previous night threatening to kill her. He was arrested the following day. I sat in my cubicle and smiled at a picture of my mom and dad. I might not be doing my job the same as my father, but times change. You can't just hang out in the woods and protect children from abusive parents by breaking into their homes and killing them. Though sometimes it's okay to get a bit extreme.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Spooky Halls. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to check out our other videos and to subscribe. Thank you and good night.